Welcome to Meet the Bloggers. I am your host, Cenk Uygur. We've got another great show ahead for you guys. We just had the vice presidential debate yesterday. Say it ain't so, Joe. Please, Jesus. All right. Now we got 32 days left of the campaign, and we got other important issues and unanswered questions. One of those is McCain's health records. He has not released them. Over 1,000 pages in health records, and he just had a hand-picked set of reporters go in there for 3 hours. That's about 18 pages a minute, if they could read them that fast. And Dr. Sanjay Gupta even said that he couldn't tell if there were missing parts of the files when he was in there for CNN. So it's a very important issue. It's one we're going to discuss today. And to help us discuss that, we had Jonathan Kim, who you guys know from the live blog and his previous appearances on Meet the Bloggers, discuss this with one of the top experts in the country, Dr. Richard Sagebiel. He's the co-director of the Melanoma Clinic at the University of California in San Francisco. He's had 30 years of experience in this field, and here's what he had to say about John McCain's health.
So, Dr. Sagebiel, thank you so much for being on Meet the Bloggers.
My pleasure, thank you.
So, could you tell me, in your opinion, why is it so important for presidential records to fully disclose their health records?
I think it's important because if there's limitation to the transparency of anybody's health records, it always raises the suspicion, what are they hiding? And usually one's imagination of what they're hiding may be greater than the actual facts of the reports themselves. To me, of course, as a pathologist, the most important part of the record would be the pathology report, the initial report, and any consultations which were made and who they were made by.
What do they need to know about melanoma? Why is it so serious?
It's a cancer like breast cancer or colon cancer. It has the possibility of spreading. Where it spreads is commonly in internal organs, which of course is very dangerous from the point of view of treatment and survival. Melanoma commonly goes to the brain. It can go to the liver and be very difficult to treat in that organ. It can go to the lungs and so on. So that its potential for metastasis is actually predictable in large part based on both clinical and pathologic features. And in this case, for example, one of the most dangerous ages and locations for melanoma tumors happens to be older men from the head and neck area.
A concern that I've heard from a lot of people around this whole issue is that people are very uncomfortable about the idea of someone's medical records being released to the public. I think an average person obviously wouldn't want it to happen to them. But could you speak to people who have those kind of concerns and who see this as very much a privacy issue?
If physicians were allowed to review pertinent parts of his record, and I think most general physicians or oncologists would be perfectly capable of evaluating that, and then the pertinent aspects could be released without much danger. And as I said originally, the fact that it is being hidden suggests to me, and I'm sure to others, that it's being hidden for a reason or restricted for a reason. Because I would personally think that at this point, the best thing that John McCain could do would be to release at least, say, the original pathology slides to a melanoma expert who could then evaluate the attributes that we do in 2008 with the slide from 2000 and be able to predict with a pretty good degree of accuracy the probabilities of the next 4 years metastases from that original melanoma.
Would that really affect memory and cognitive skills if that happened, if there was a brain metastases?
Commonly, well, I would think of also brain tumors. I'm thinking of Senator Ted Kennedy, who had a rather large and malignant tumor, as I understand it, with very few symptoms until the end, and then I guess it was headaches and other brain metastases or tumors will produce seizures, and there's a whole host of symptoms that might occur. But it's always been amazing to me how our patients with brain metastases from melanoma might have 8 or 10 nodules, separate foci of metastases in the brain with very few, if any, symptoms, and it can be picked up with some vision loss or some headaches, unexplained headaches, and so on. So that it's remarkable how much can go on cognitively in terms of memory loss or in terms of tumor before it's really perceived, and then it becomes an immediate emergency.
Sort of going away from cancer for a second, I mean, he would be the oldest first-term president in American history. Regarding his age, what are some things that people need to know about a man his age, especially in such a high-pressure, high-stress job like the presidency?
I can tell you from personal experience about age, and age is something where disease happens, cancers happen, heart attacks happen. There are a number of things that happen at an age past 70 years, and I think those are all things which can be evaluated to a certain extent on physical exams, but we also know of many patients who walk out of an annual examination given a clean bill of health and have a heart attack on the steps of the hospital. So it's very unpredictable, but it is predictable to say that increasing age causes increasing potential for any kind of disease or cancer.
Well, Dr. Sagebiel, thank you so much for your time. I think that we've all really learned a lot, and I think we all have a much better understanding of why it is so important that John McCain's health records be released. So thank you so much for being with us today.
You're quite welcome, and I appreciate your asking.
And I'm Jonathan Kim for Meet the Bloggers.
Thank you, Jonathan. That was an excellent interview. And you know what? We're going to now look at a short film that Brave New Films put together. They put it up on YouTube. It was about John McCain's health and whether he should release his medical records. It's already gotten 500,000 views on YouTube. Let's check it out right now.
Senator McCain's medical records were released to a select group of journalists.
It's sort of a little bit of a different experience than I'm used to as a medical doctor. We're going to be sort of ensconced in this room for a period of time. No electronic devices are allowed in.
Over 1,000 pages of his own health records.
3 hours to review hundreds of pages of medical records. A daunting task, even for a doctor. No copies can be made of McCain's records. There's no internet or cell phone use allowed in the room.
He's running for the highest office in the land. His health, with limits, becomes the public business.
He's had every kind of skin cancer you can get. Basal cell cancer, squamous cell cancer, and of course malignant melanoma.
There's so much we don't know about this illness, and it's so incredibly difficult to treat once it has recurred, that the relevance of knowing the details of his course with melanoma are.
You can see the whole film right there. It's only about 4 minutes long or so on bravenewfilms.org. So check that out online. Now let's meet the bloggers. That's what we do here. Cheryl Contee, she blogs as Jill Tubman at jackandjillpolitics.com. She's written that electing John McCain would be sort of something like Cocoon meets the Golden Girls. Ari Melber also joins us. He's a regular contributor to the Huffington Post, The Nation, Politico.com, and a frequent guest on The Young Turks, which I hear is a very good program. In a recent post, Ari warned that if McCain doesn't feel any duty to be straight with the public during a pressure of a campaign, don't count on his being any more open, candid, or honest if he's elected. And finally, Karel joins us. He blogs at Huffington Post. He's also a talk show host for KGO FM in San Francisco. That's a giant radio station in San Francisco. Karel says that John McCain promises straight talk and then practices hypocrisy by failing to come clean with his health history. Welcome to the show, everybody. Cheryl, I want to start with you. I've also written about this. What is it? Are we worried about being polite or impolite? We're going to offend his sensibilities? Why aren't we demanding to see his health records?
Oh, I think people are demanding to see his health records. What's happening is that McCain supporters, such as Bill O'Reilly and others, are shutting down the conversation because they're afraid of what they might actually hear or see. I mean, I would like to know, what is in John McCain's left jaw. I mean, there's clearly a difference in size between one jaw and the other, and the American people needs to know, is Dick Cheney hatching something in there? Is he hiding the souls of the Vietnamese villagers he killed? I mean, what is it?
I'm not sure I'd go that far, but I want to talk about the media reaction to this, because when you bring this up and Brave New Films runs this ad, MSNBC has pulled it. O'Reilly yelled at them. Ooh, we might show that in a second. But they get skittish about this, Ari, and they don't want to show it. What's that all about? I mean, have they done a poor job of putting pressure on McCain to release his health records here? And why are they so skittish?
Well, I think it's perfectly understandable. This is a very human reaction. Journalists are people too, even if you don't like them. And they're both responsive to the pressure, but also to the fact that it's uncomfortable to talk about disease and death. We do have a tradition of very, very strong privacy protections about medical records for regular citizens, and no one's disputing that. Of course, the candidate is a public person. So I do think it comes from a very understandable place. But that emotional reaction that people have, nobody's wishing ill on any of these candidates, I would hope, but that emotional piece of it doesn't resolve the journalistic and governance questions. And it is an outrage that the entire traveling press corps agreed to journalistic malpractice by going into this 3-hour cone of silence where they weren't even allowed to interview doctors while they looked over thousands of medical records. And most of those reporters are not doctors. They don't have the expertise or the ability to independently assess those records. And the McCain campaign shut down that inquiry and ensured that no independent doctors would even hear about the records, let alone examine them themselves. So while I think the press is coming from arguably an understandable place, it is led to total journalistic malpractice. And people have to press this issue, especially going into the remaining debates, because John McCain must release these records and get straight with the American people.
Ari, how do we resolve this? Because, he doesn't have a legal obligation to release the medical records. So right. It is a matter of pressure being put on him, but it looks like the McCain camp is going to say, you know what, for the next 32 days, we're not going to release the medical records. We're not going to release Sarah Palin. No more interviews for her. That's it. So you like, you don't like, you don't like. I mean, is that the bottom line? It's just down to politics? Or does the media have an extra responsibility to tell the people at home, look, these people are not doing this, and there's a reason why they're not doing this?
Yeah, I think the media has that responsibility. I think the debates are supposed to be the area for tough questions. We're going into the second debate here, and WebMD is an official sponsor with the commission. They're currently soliciting questions from the public online on their site, WebMD. I checked recently, they only had about 200 comments, so they're definitely not getting a lot of interest because they haven't really shared and promoted it well, even though we know there's tremendous interest in the campaigns in general, and also in this issue because of the media failure. So one thing people can do is go up to WebMD, file these questions, put them on media blog sites, write letters to the editor, ask the press to ask the questions, to at least raise this for McCain. Unfortunately, because he's been stonewalling, I don't think he's likely to release the records unless he faces political pressure. Hopefully, he's healthy. Hopefully, the records are vindicating, and under pressure, he could release them, and we could all move on to other things. I think it's a sad piece of media failure and campaign stonewalling that we even have to worry about this in October, but we do, because unfortunately, if there's anything in those records that give people pause about his medical status that he has perhaps been hiding, which is perhaps why he didn't consent to have any independent doctors look at them, and he restricted it to 3 hours and did really unreasonable things that the media agreed to. If there's anything in there, we need to know about it before this election.
Karel, what's the worst case scenario here for John McCain, and how is that relevant?
Well, the worst case scenario is that John McCain loses the election, which I think would be the best case scenario for us. But what we're really talking about here is a bunch of pussyfooting around by the media, by the public, by Bill O'Reilly being outraged just means you're onto something good. He hates me as well. This is ridiculous. This man is 72 years old, lived through 3 plane crashes, 5 years of torture. How many bouts with cancer? 5, as referenced earlier. We don't know what's growing in his left cheek. It is, quite frankly, abnormal. And since he won't release his records, all we have to go on is speculation. So we see him acting in a sort of disoriented way, and we wonder, is this man, starting to have dementia? Well, we don't know, because some of the records that aren't being released are the psychiatric records. Is that unfair speculation? No, because when we look into his records, we look into our future. Our future, if he is elected, is either a John McCain or a senator or a Sarah Palin, not senator, Mayor Sarah Palin presidency. And that's very relevant to us. So if there is anything in those records that we, the people, this is a job interview. Why is everyone not acting like this is a job interview? We are interviewing this man for the highest position in the land. You want to know what your airline pilot, if he has blackouts. You want to know if your doctor has a drug problem. And you need to know if your president's going to drop dead in office or has a higher chance than most.
Cheryl, in fact, don't we have more exams for our pilots than we do for our presidents?
That's true. My brother is a pilot, and he has to receive regular physicals, and those are reported. I think that the fact that actuarial tables, say that John McCain has a 1 in 4 chance of dying in his first term of office, and an even greater chance within within 2 terms, I think that that's of real concern to Americans, and we need to have a strong assessment of, how long would he actually make it given his, his current condition. And I think it's important to understand, the mental health aspect here. We know that he, has had anger moments. Other senators have attested to, both, sort of emotional and physical altercations with John McCain. He's also had those with some of the press recently. So I think that we need to have a full understanding of, who is this man, and what is his fitness for office.
Now, speaking of mental issues, I want to go to a clip from Bill O'Reilly. I don't know if you guys saw it last night when he flipped out on Barney Frank, but this is a different one where he flips out on this issue. He's a little touchy on it, apparently. Let's watch their reaction to the Brave New Films ad.
Perhaps the most vicious political ad of the campaign is running on MSNBC. Fox would not run something like this. CNN reportedly turned it down.
This is a personal, vile attack on John McCain. Listen, whether you think his health records are fair game or not, the up-close and personal shot of his scar, the suggestion that he's going to die soon, I'm sure that went over well with his family. I mean, it's just cruel.
Questioning John McCain's health, but tell us about those actuarial tables that Cheryl was referring to. All right, well, we're going to get back to Karel in a second. So, Ari, do you have those actuarial tables in front of you?
Well, I don't have them in front of me, but they are on the front of newspapers. There was a Florida paper that ran a story this week talking about the tendency or statistics regarding when people of different ages pass away. Again, this comes back to the idea that it's uncomfortable, but I do think even local reporters are now out ahead of the national press corps. And it is something that has to be considered. That ad has images in it that many people would feel are unnecessarily controversial, that, as the O'Reilly's guest said, might be tough for his family. But you know what? The whole topic is tough for his family. The whole topic is tough because we're talking about whether he is concealing information about medical problems he's having. So nobody's saying this is easy. What people are saying is this is important, and he is wrong, and his doctors, I think, are wrong to deny an independent review.
Well, it reminds me of like an old movie I saw where, I found out that Jewish Americans, they don't say cancer, they say cancer. And they whisper it. And it's like we're in the middle of trying to find out who should have the most important job in the world. We're going around whispering. But it turns out, Ari, sometimes it's incredibly relevant as having a Paul Tsongas, right? So let's talk about that.
Yeah, as I wrote it in my column on this for Politico, Paul Tsongas, who was a Democrat, these are not partisan issues, had his doctors come out when he was running in the primary in '91 and say, oh, he's fine. He had some cancer history, but he was going to be fine. He didn't win that primary, but he did, unfortunately, pass away very soon after. And I quoted a New York Times editorial from that period. We've been through this before. These are not all new questions, where they were saying that Paul Tsongas and his doctors should have been obviously fuller and open about the information they had, because apparently there was more information that suggested he is had far larger health problems than he disclosed to the public while he was running for commander-in-chief. And the Times then said in '91 that there should be some sort of official policy, that the government should have a requirement for candidates for office, so this wasn't a political football every year. Well, here we are, many cycles later. It's now happens to be a Republican, not a Democrat, but it doesn't matter. I don't think the politics of it are about left or right. They're about open transparency and getting to the bottom of this. And in the sad case of Senator Tsongas, although he was a good man and may he rest in peace, he was not straight when he was running his campaign, and it was only that he lost the campaign that we know about it the way it happened, and it wasn't a crisis in office.
Let alone the fact that Tsongas didn't get a chance to pick a VP nominee, and that VP nominee was not Sarah Palin. I mean, look, we're dancing around it, but we're not, but media is. The fact is Sarah Palin is tremendously unqualified for the position, so John McCain's health becomes even more relevant. Also, his temperament is relevant, and Brave New Films has put together a short video about that as well that we want to check out because it relates back to the psychiatric issues possibly that Karel was bringing up. So let's check that out right now.
So it sat fine for 45 minutes and then breathes 3 times.
He is uncontrollable. He does not think before he acts.
He has a very disturbing penchant for erupting unpredictably.
I've seen the dark side, as they say, of John McCain.
I will confess to you, my friend, that I get angry.
John McCain, a question of temperament.
McCain is known to have a hot temper. Several of his colleagues say he is a hothead.
This is not passion. This is deep anger, hostility toward other human beings.
First time we had a bill, Tim Wirth of Colorado, the senator there, who had served with John McCain in the House, had come over before, was pushing back. He was holding up our bill. So we walked back, I never forget, walking back to the Capitol, and we were talking to Senator Wirth about pulling off his hold. It was a hold, it was blocking the legislation. And he didn't want to do it. And McCain just got mad as could be and started pointing his finger into Wirth's chest, you know. And afterwards, I went to see Tim and worked on the legislation, which we finally got passed. He said, no, I learned that in the House, that McCain blows his temper, and when you move in close to him, he has a difficult time coping with that.
Well, it's not just senators expressing concern about him. According to Salon.com, it's the military. Major General Paul Eaton telling Salon, quote, I'm a little worried about his knee-jerk response factor. I think it is a little scary. Former Republican and former Air Force Chief of Staff General.
Well, you can see that whole clip on bravenewfilms.org. It goes on for a little while longer to explain the whole history of it. Cheryl, let me ask you about the history just real quick. This is not an isolated incident for John McCain. Apparently he's done this over and over with these outbursts.
Is that for Karel or for me?
No, that's for you, Cheryl.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, we have similar names. Yes, I think
we do, actually. I just noticed.
We do. I think it's disturbing, his behavior. There was, there are other disturbing aspects of his behavior that we've seen lately where his cheek, and eye are twitching, where he has trouble figuring out, which way to leave the stage and looks very disoriented. I think that, these behavioral issues are challenging, and I have heard in my own personal experience that it's actually older people who are the most concerned about John McCain's age because they know better, than younger folks, what challenges John McCain may actually be having.
Yes, and about this campaign in particular, Karel, I wanted to come to you about that. He's already done some things, including with an editorial board, that makes you question. Tell us about that.
Well, yeah, he was meeting with the editorial board, and they questioned his truthfulness, which he has lied, and he refuses to admit that he has lied, which is another sort of mental illness, like a dissociative disorder, where you look at facts and still come up with a different solution. And he really gave this look at them. It was on MSNBC. They had the tape Rachel Maddow did, where if looks could kill, everyone in the room would have been dead. I mean, he said, I take great umbrage with anyone. I don't think he said umbrage, but I take great disdain with anybody, implying that I would not be 100%. I mean, this man was red, his veins were going. He was very, very upset that his truthfulness is questioned, and yet we know he's lying. So all of these things don't make any sense. Look, I respect the man, what he did in Vietnam. I don't know that I could have done it. I know that takes a toll on you. And so to deny all of that, but let's get to the real point of his medical records. We all know the man's old, and I don't want to, I hate to say this, but getting somewhat infirm. We can just see that. We don't need medical records to show that. What this is really about is, again, McCain has promised change. He has promised to be a straight shooter and a straight talker. And yet here we are talking for 30 minutes about the fact that he's giving America the runaround on probably the most important documents in his possession right now, more than Cindy's tax returns, more than his, we know he's got 13 houses, are his medical records. And yet he's playing hard to get with those, just like he played hard to get with Sarah Palin. John McCain's strategy is, if it's not going to play well in the media, try to keep it away from the media as much as you can. Keep the medical records away, keep Sarah Palin away, keep whatever you can away from the media, and then paint the media as your enemy and how evil of the media to come after me about my medical records. Oh, woe is me. Cry me a river. You're supposed to be a maverick. You know, act like one for a change. Stop all the talk and do something.
By the way, I don't think you're allowed to call yourself a maverick. And you just keep
Well,
going
you know,
around
what's really
saying,
odd is
I'm the team of Mavericks.
I really wouldn't call myself a maverick.
All right, final question for you real quick. Well, this is an issue of temper for John McCain. Is not something new. I mean, it could be incredibly relevant if he's president, because during one meeting in Latin America, apparently he grabbed the guy by the collar and started roughing him up. I mean, and the other senators were so concerned. They're like, I don't know if we have enough security down here. I mean, this guy just got physical. So given his history of these tantrums, basically, how relevant is that for our president?
Well, it's relevant. It's something people have to consider. You know, I don't actually agree with everything that Cheryl and Karel said, although I know we're short on time, but I do think Karel is absolutely right about this straight shooter talk. I mean, if he's not being open about this stuff when he's under the pressure of a presidential campaign, what kind of information are we expecting to get out of a McCain-Palin administration? And after 8 years of secrecy about everything from government crimes to the candidate's personal activities, that's a very serious problem, especially here with the medical issues we've discussed. Temper is different. He can be perfectly healthy now. He's been perfectly healthy at other points in his life and has always had this temper, this temperament, this anger, this shoot from the hip attitude. And voters have to decide whether they like that. Some people said that was great for Bush. That was something that he actually basically ran on in 2000, that style. Although I don't know that it played well in his governing. People have to decide whether they think that John McCain's attitude in those videos, the anger see at times, and just his general, bravado that he's going to fire the SEC chair, that he's going to do this and do that, that he's going to suspend his campaign. Oh no, wait, he's not. I mean, it's larger than anger. It's a temperament that if you like it, you say shoots from the hip, or maverick, as they like to say. If you don't like it, or you look closely, I think you start to see it as erratic and really as so emotional. I mean, this is a really emotional guy that goes beyond passion. It gets to the point where he doesn't seem to use a lot of reason. He doesn't even act in his own interest. That's what we saw in saying he might suspend the campaign. That wasn't a net gain for him. It was just an idea that just popped out, and then he took it back when he thought better of it, the next day when cooler heads prevailed. So I think that voters have to consider it.
Or picking Sarah Palin after having a 15-minute conversation with her. And I forget if it was Cheryl or Karel who said before we started the show, if he keeps shooting from the hip so much, he's going to break his hip. So we don't want more medical conditions for John McCain. Guys, we're out of time. We want to thank all of you so much for joining us. Everybody can continue to check out the blogs and the writings and the show for Karel at their respective places. Karel's on KGO in San Francisco. He blogs at Huffington Post. Ari writes for TheNation.com, Politico, and Huffington Post as well. And Cheryl, you could always catch her as Jill Tubman on JackandJillPolitics.com. Of course, I'm on TheYoungTurks.com. Not only do we do the show there, but we've got a blog there where I wrote something about this as well. And next week, we got a great show for you guys. John Cusack is going to be our special guest. He's going to talk about the new movie, War Incorporated. It's going to be at the same time as always, of course, Friday at 1 o'clock Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. And until then, do something.